You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us. Hi, I'm Annie from the US.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you are listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast with two hosts from two continents who never met in real life.
Yeah, that's right. We're strangers. This is all very weird. Also, we're back.
Yes, sorry for not uploading an episode last week. I know we said that I would be doing one alone. And, I was working on it, and halfway through I realized that the episode would be so much better with Annie in it. And so I decided to wait another week until she could be back joining us for this episode. And if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram, you already know that. And if not, sorry. But it was a nice 2-week break, to be honest. And I think deserved. Our last real vacation was after Christmas.
Yeah, it's good to take just a break every now and then, a little vacation. And I think also we just want to make sure that you always get the best possible episodes.
Yes.
So sometimes things pop up and it's like, well, we could throw something together, but we don't, that's not really how we roll. So I think it's sometimes worth the wait. Hopefully. What else do we have to tell you? Oh, Johanna's personal podcast goal was reached. This is amazing.
Yes, huge, huge, huge thank you to everyone who voted for us in the podcast magazine Hot 50. You did it!
We're hot.
You did not only manage to get us in the top 10, which was my goal, we actually landed on the 5th spot. You can stop voting now. You don't have to. You can keep voting. But my own personal goal is therefore reached. Thank you so much. We truly have the best listeners. But don't worry, starting from July, I will beg you weekly to vote for us in the 2022 People's Choice Podcast Awards. More details on that will follow as soon as the polls are up.
Yeah, we have to try to defend our title now, don't we? This is intense. All right, I think it's now time to dive into today's episode because I was so excited. I was on a whale watch. I was getting ready to go out on a whale watch, and I got a message from Johanna saying, I really don't want to do this one without you. It's so interesting. And I was like, oh, yay, because I hate don't get me wrong. You do an amazing job. If we have to do one on our own, we can do one on our own. But I love it when you tell me that you have a really juicy sort of interesting one for me. And it's another case from Germany. So excited.
And it was so funny when I made the announcement in the Facebook group that there won't be an episode last week because it will be a way better episode if Annie was back already, and that the upcoming episode was going to be about a very interesting case, a German murder case from the 1980s. And I don't know, 20 minutes later I get a message from one of our Facebook hellions, and she goes, you know what, I was wondering if it would be about the Göhrde Murders. And of course she was right, because we truly have the smartest listeners. I don't know how she figured it out, but man, that's some armchair detective, Sherlock Holmes kind of shit going on there. So, this will be a 2-part episode, with part 2 coming next week, so just be aware of that.
I am so excited for this. So is Opus, if you can hear him singing the song of his people in the background. He's very vocal today. But I don't think I know anything about this case, so I'm here for it.
I'd say let's go. Let's do this. So, this all took place in 1989 in Lower Saxony, in the Göhrde State Forest to be exact. So the Göhrde State Forest is located roughly 100 kilometers or 62 miles southeast of Hamburg, and it's the largest contiguous mixed forest region in northern Germany. Annie's favorite source to quote from Wikipedia says the following, quote, "The state forest of Göhrde is about 75 square kilometers in area, and its heart has some very old stands of trees. Many of these giant trees, especially English oaks, have been designated as natural monuments and are protected. The main species of tree in the woods, which lie on the mostly sandy soils and rolling terrain, are the Scots pine, common beech, spruce, and oak." The long-stemmed oaks are important for silviculture and belong to the most profitable in Germany due to their closely spaced annual rings that are produced by the warm, sunny climate and low levels of rainfall. Fallow deer, red deer, and mufflon live in the forest. The Göhrde was once a favorite hunting ground of the Dukes of Brunswick-Lüneburg. Later, the kings of Hanover also hunted here, and, to 1918, the German emperors. The buildings of the old Göhrde hunting lodge still stand in the village of Göhrde in the heart of the state forest. The castle itself was demolished in 1827. The remaining buildings house the Göhrde Training Center, Bildungszentrum Göhrde. On the northern edge of the forest in the village of Brese am Seiselberge is Göhrde Station, on the Wendland Railway, which was named after the forest, because the emperors of Germany used to alight at this station as they traveled to their hunts in the forest. It was also locally known as the Kaiserbahnhof, which is the emperor's station, end quote. Another interesting thing, well, at least it's very interesting to me, is that on 16th of September 1813, the Battle of the Göhrde took place between Napoleonic troops and troops of the coalition between Prussia, Russia, and the United Kingdom. There were many other countries involved in the Sixth Coalition, but these were the ones involved in that battle. The French troops, by the way, were defeated. What might also be interesting to some of you, as this takes place in 1989, Germany was still divided into two separate countries, the BRD, which is the Bundesrepublik Deutschland, or in English the FRG, which means Federal Republic of Germany, and the DDR, which is the Deutsche Demokratische Republik, or in English, the GDR, the German Democratic Republic.
Okay, now, this is even very interesting to me because maybe I had learned this at some point, but if I think of divided Germany, I would only know it as East and West Germany. I'm not sure which is which, actually. Which one?
The BRD is the western
west.
part. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think most North Americans would probably maybe be the same as me, but it could be a fact that I alone just learned today or forgot before.
Yeah, but the official names are were not East and West Germany. That's more the colloquial terms for it.
Yes. No, that's what I'm saying. I'd never known what the correct terms were. So, sorry. It was just interesting to me.
Learn something new every day.
Every single day.
So the Berlin Wall fell on 9th of November 1989, but it still would be another 11 months until the two German states were reunited on 3rd of October 1990. But as I said, this takes place the summer before that, in 1989. And it's Sunday, 21st of May, 1989. It's a sunny day, a few clouds here and there. During the day, the temperatures will reach roughly 20 degrees Celsius, which, if I convert it correctly, it's 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So a perfectly nice spring day in Hamburg.
That's my perfect day. That's a absolutely perfect day for me. Perfect.
So that's where 51-year-old Peter Reinold and his 45-year-old wife Ursula live with their kids. As far as I could figure out, they had two daughters. One is 22 years old at the time, and she had already moved out. And then there's a 14-year or 16-year-old, depending on which sources you read. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Also, I'm not gonna name their names for privacy reasons. But yes, the younger child was still living with the parents, and so around 9 a.m. Peter and Ursula tell their daughter they were off for a day at the Göhrde. So they get into their car, it's a silver Honda Civic, and off they went. And I think it was their daughter who later stated that her father had fueled up the car the day before and that he always used to reset the mileage counter after filling up the tank. And that's something I do. I never actually really check how far a full tank gets me. I know approximately, but I guess it's just so ingrained in our very anal culture over here. I can say that I maybe only forgot to do that like a handful of times over the years. It's just very automated. It's an automated thing for us. Even though nowadays modern cars have all the data in the board computer, of course. I just take a wild guess here. Even today, most people probably still reset their mileage after every visit at the gas station.
Oh, see, that's so interesting. So Paul always resets his mileage after every fill up, and he still does on his old Audi. And when I say old, it's 25, 26. It's old enough to be the parent of our new car, which is 9. So apparently the new car resets the trip mileage every time you completely fill the tank, and Paul loves it. I think the last time I reset my mileage, this is a perfect example of the difference between the two of us. I think it was before I got my first GPS. So like sometime post 2001, right around 2001. Because do you remember back in the day, you'd either have handwritten directions, or if you were rich or like worked somewhere that had a computer, you'd have a MapQuest printout. And so you'd look at the directions and it would say something like, drive 3.2 miles down Main Street, then take a left on Elm Street. And so you'd hit that thing. And then after 8 miles, and you'd hit the mileage thing again to track to the next waypoint. I have never in my life had it together enough to track my fuel consumption. I just don't have it in me. I'm lucky if I have it together enough and try to figure out if somebody in town has a better price on gas. And that was true when I was living on ramen. And every single penny was like desperation.
So back to Peter and Ursula Reinold. They didn't return that day, and they also didn't return the next day. And so the young girl, she goes downstairs. They live in an apartment building, and downstairs lives her uncle, her dad's brother. And she tells them that her parents left the day before. They went to go to enjoy a nice stroll in the Göhrde, maybe have a picnic, and they didn't come back. And she also calls her older sister, and together the family decides that it was time to call the police. So they are reported missing, but the family doesn't only rely on the police to find their missing loved ones. They spend many days driving through the forest and going from door to door with a photo of Ursula and Peter, asking if anyone has seen them. And it's 1 week later when there's the first sign of the married couple. No, they're not found, but their car is. In Winsen an der Luhe, which is a town roughly 60 kilometers or 37 miles northwest of Göhrde, the car is parked in front of a small bakery, and it has been parked there for a couple of days already, which honestly annoyed the shop owner. Understandably so, because he would have preferred that parking spot for his customers. So he decides to investigate, and he realizes the car is unlocked. And that's weird, right? But maybe it's also not that weird, because it's the 80s after all, and people were still way more trusting. Which makes me think of a story that happened to my dad. I'll tell you in the end. But okay, so the baker finds it weird or suspicious and or annoying, so he calls the police. And they figure out that this is indeed the car of Peter and Ursula Reinold, the missing couple. But it will take another 6 weeks before they are finally found. On 12th of July 1989, 3 people are out in the forest looking for blueberries, when they smell something horrible. And we've had this exact situation in other episodes before, and it's a smell you immediately recognize, even if you've never smelled it before, I think. It's the smell of decay. They follow the horrible smell and they find something. Because there, under some brushwood, they see a hand, and of course, that's not good.
No.
And thank God they are smart and they don't investigate further, because I think a hand in the bushes is all you need to see, right?
I would say so, for sure. Yeah.
And so they call the police and they take them to the spot where they saw the hands, and they also tell the police that when they were walking to the closest forester's lodge, to get to a phone, they encountered a man with brown hair, a muscular build, slender, approximately 40 years old, with a bag in his hand. But at first the police is busy with other things and they don't pay too much attention to this encounter. But they would be soon enough, though.
That first couple, the people that found the hand, though, compliments...
The
blueberry pickers, yeah, compliments to them, because at that time, it just occurred to me, people didn't really have the same knowledge about not contaminating crime scenes and, you know what I mean, and sort of taking notice of things like that. They were impressive.
Also, I think, it's a horrible smell. It's in the middle of summer.
Yeah,
and
you
there's
don't
a hand.
Get too close.
You don't want to get too close anyway,
yeah.
I think.
Especially since it was a hand, you're right. If it had been a hand,
clothes or
human,
a bag or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's something you knew exactly. That's never a good sign.
It's not a deer. No.
So when the police arrives, they find the naked body of a man and a woman. And as I said before, it's summer and the bodies have been out there for several weeks already. And so they show signs of advanced decomposition and partial mummification and signs of damage caused probably by wild animals, possibly boars. As I said, the man and the woman, they are naked. Well, almost naked. The woman is still wearing a skirt that has slid up to her waist. She was wearing a blue shirt and some bluish flower print skirt that day. So the skirt has been slid up to her waist, and they are both on their bellies, and the arms are crossed behind their backs as if they'd been tied up. The police find some, I think, jewelry with the victims, and they have a feeling that it could be the bodies of Peter and Ursula because, I mean, it's a couple that they know has been missing in the Göhrde for several weeks, right?
Yeah.
And so they show the items they found to the daughters, and it can be confirmed Peter and Ursula Reinold are dead.
I mean, she must have known because these don't seem like the sort of people who would be away that long from their family without, it would have to be something.
An accident
awful.
Or something.
But still, you must, so sad.
I mean, it's the worst possible news, yeah.
It is, yeah.
Now, as for the cause of death, due to the state the bodies were in, it's pretty impossible to determine the cause of death. They do rule out death by suicide or accident, so it's clear to them that they must have fallen victim to a crime. And the police thinks that they were either shot, strangled, or battered to death. Because Peter's larynx shows injuries, but it's impossible to know if they come from strangulation or if they were caused by boars roaming the forest. Let's see, what else does the police find? They know that the location where the bodies were found was not the scene of crime, because they were hidden under some bushes and underbrush. They were murdered elsewhere and brought there to be hidden under the brushwood. The fact that they were naked either means that they were undressed by the murderer, but it's also very likely that they were out there in the forest in a glade, sunbathing and enjoying their picnic that they had brought with them. The clothes and I think the picnic basket or bag they had with them cannot be found at the crime scene. Now, for the investigators are working the case, they are trying to find any traces of the murderer, and people come forward saying they saw the couple eating lunch here and there, and all in all it was a lot of contradicting reports, which is often the case. A woman contacts the police. She saw Peter and Ursula that day. She was out with a friend riding their horses when they crossed path with the couple who was on foot. And Ursula, as I said, was wearing the blue shirt and the blue skirt. She was carrying the picnic basket. The woman asked Ursula if they were out looking for mushrooms because it's too early in the season for mushrooms. And Ursula laughingly replied, no, that's just their picnic they brought with them. The woman remembers that they were both in a very good mood and they were laughing and having a good time, and Peter was wearing white sneakers. Hours later, the women on their horses were on their way back when all of a sudden a silver Honda Civic was racing down the forest road in their direction, almost as if the driver was aiming the car at them. The two women had to hurry to move their horses out of the way as the car sped past them. The woman said she didn't get a good look at the driver, so she couldn't describe him or that person. A couple of days later, again, when she was out riding her horse, she was sure she saw one of Peter's white sneakers lying on the ground, but she was galloping and didn't slow down to investigate further. And I mean, I understand, because at that point she didn't know that the couple she met a couple of days prior was even missing, right? So I think it's natural that she didn't think too much of it. It's a shoe in the forest. Yeah. Of course, we are all way more suspicious nowadays because we listen to crime podcasts and watch and read a lot about true crime. But back then, to her, it was just a lost shoe.
Yeah, and you do see, is it the same there where you'll regularly see just a random shoe on a highway? Or is that more of an American thing?
Very rarely.
Okay. I feel like that happens with too much frequency here. And I don't know...
How?
Is
Why?
it people who stick their feet out the car window and rest it? That's foolish and dangerous.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that. That's a really good way to end up with your kneecap in your mouth.
Yeah.
Anyway. But we do see abandoned shoes occasionally, so it wouldn't be the weirdest thing you ever saw,
But it's good that she remembered that.
Yes.
And told the police about it.
I'm impressed with the recall of all of these people.
Yeah. Then 2 weeks after Ursula and Peter are found, something else happens. It's the 27th of July, 1989, and the police officers are searching the forest once more. They are checking every square meter. They are combing the area, trying to find more evidence. And they do find something, but it's not something that they were hoping to find. They find 2 more bodies.
No.
And again, It's a man and a woman. And they are not hidden under brushwood. Again, they are lying on their belly, their arms behind their backs. The woman, hands or feet, that also depends on the sources you read. I think it was more likely the feet. They are tied with a special medical tape that has been wrapped counterclockwise. The identity of the two victims, it's 46-year-old Ingrid Warmbier and 43-year-old Bernd-Michael Köpping. And the two were married, but not to each other.
Oh. So were they having an affair?
Yes, apparently they had met during a stay at a health resort and were now having an affair. The last day they were seen was on 12th of July 1989. That's when they met up and they drove to Bad Bevensen, where they probably had lunch. Then they drove to the close-by Göhrde forest for some privacy. And that's where they must have run into their murderer. The bodies, as I mentioned before, are on their bellies. Ingrid's blouse was pushed upwards. The bra was cut open. Again, the victims, as I said, are tied with the medical tape, or just a woman in that case. I'm not really sure if they found traces of medical tape on Bernd, but Bernd shows signs of strangulation. Ingrid has severe injuries in her face and on her chest. Both victims were shot while lying on their back, while facing down. The bullets
so they were shot in the back of the head while lying face down?
In the back of their head, yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What else? The bullets came most likely from a small caliber weapon, but neither the casing nor the projectiles can be found on scene. When talking to the victims' families and witnesses who last saw them alive and, due to the crime scene, the investigators get a pretty good idea of what must have happened to Ingrid and Bernd-Michael. So Bernd-Michael picked up Ingrid in his Toyota Tercel. Together they drove to Bad Bevensen, where they had, as I said, lunch. I mentioned it before. Witnesses saw them. Then they drove to the Göhrde, parked the car close to a forester's lodge, and walked roughly 2 kilometers or 1.2 miles into the forest. Then they must have encountered the murderer. He was probably threatening them with his weapon, forcing them to leave the path and walk them into the underwood. He then made them lie on the ground face down, tied their hands behind their backs and the legs in Ingrid's case. He strangled Bernd-Michael Köpping and injured Ingrid Warmbier. Then he shot them. The police couldn't tell in which order they were injured and killed, but they did determine that the location where they were found was also the crime scene. Then the murderer took a Polaroid camera and some other stuff they had with them, and also Bernd's car keys, and he returned to the car and drove off. And now that's very eerie. Apparently he kept using the car over the next couple of days, and then he parked it in Bad Bevensen, where it was ultimately found in a parking lot.
Wow. Okay. So that's some nerve there to murder two people and then steal their car and keep driving it around. Yeah. That's really... Wow. So it seems like the murderer was not at all worried that the police were going to, start looking for the car. But hadn't they parked like a mile away and then schlepped through the woods to get there? Or was it like a trail or a path?
Well, they were on a path and... Right, it wasn't parked in like a huge parking lot, not like you have in the national forest. You park your car in one of the parking lots. But it was, I guess, close to the trail or to the path they were on.
Right. Okay. Because now, as if this story wasn't tragic enough and creepy enough, it seems like he found their car. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that he was following them from where they parked? Like, could he have been stalking them?
That's what I was thinking.
Oh, I don't
Otherwise,
like that.
How would he have found the car, right? But then again, it was a Wednesday. Maybe there weren't too many cars parked there. On the other hand, it was school holidays. Maybe it was the logical place for them, that they must have parked the car somewhere around there when they were on that path. I'm not really sure about the layout of the trails there. It could have been just the most obvious parking spot somewhere in that area, and then you just walk around and look for the Toyota.
Right.
I don't know. But for me, also, it definitely seems the more logical explanation is that he must have been on the lookout for victims.
Yeah. And see, usually I'd have said, well, maybe somebody who knew them, maybe one of the spouses, because they were having an affair. So I could see maybe one of the spouses following their their spouse and then following the couple, except it's the way they were killed. It's too many similarities with the murders of Peter and Ursula, right? Because if you would think if you were killing your cheating spouse, it would be more like you just shoot them. You wouldn't have them, you wouldn't go through all the motions of get down and all of this. What were the dates again? Like, how close was it when they were murdered and found?
Peter and Ursula Reinold were last seen on 21st of May 1989. So I think it's safe to say that was the day they died.
Yeah.
And they were found on 12th of July 1989.
Wait. Oh, sorry. When did you say Ingrid and Bernd? When was the second murder?
On 12th of July 1989.
Okay. Sorry. So they were murdered on the day that the other victims were found? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, you got that correct.
No.
It's very...
No, I don't like that at all. What was the distance between the two locations? Like, the location from where the first couple was found and then the location where the second couple was murdered?
So that was roughly 800 meters or half a mile.
I could walk that.
Yeah, and now it gets even more horrible. The investigators found it very likely that the second couple was murdered while the other couple was found by the, blueberry pickers. Or even worse, while the police was already at the location investigating.
Wow. That reminds me, in The Stranger Beside Me, or it was something about Ted Bundy that I read and or saw, but I don't know if you remember this, but somebody was basically recalling how they'd been out on a date and they were with a partner and they were going to hike up this mountain to look out the stars and probably make out or whatever. And they had this really creepy, awful feeling and they just got a real bad vibe and they left. I think she said that she was worried that there might have been a mountain lion or something stalking them. And then later, of course, found out that this was exactly the spot where Ted had been dumping and revisiting his victims' bodies. It reminds me of
I think I remember.
Yeah.
Wasn't there something similar with the Zodiac?
Yes.
Horrible.
Yes. And you just wonder if the couple was lying there on their stomachs, and could hear people searching. But did nobody hear anything? Because the second couple was shot, right? So...
Yeah, you wonder why nobody reported gunshots, right? If they were killed at the time when people were there 800 meters away. The police did some testing because obviously they were wondering the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And they found that it was almost impossible or pretty much impossible to hear gunshots coming from crime scene 2 while standing in crime scene 1 because both locations were in dips. Is that the right word? They were located lower with an elevated ground between them. Like
in the valley with hills on either side. That makes... it's interesting, isn't it, how many cases we've had where sound and how sound works comes into play.
So interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's so creepy, though. Just thinking that 2 more people were killed on the exact day that the first...
That exact day, because, that's something the murderer couldn't have anticipated.
No.
When the first couple was found. Yeah, that was a surprise.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And only a half a mile. That's so close. One other thing, because you were mentioning that the people who found the first body, the blueberry... I don't want to say the blueberry people, the blueberry pickers.
The blueberry pickers, yeah.
The blueberry people. Daddy. So... they encountered somebody, right, though, and they were on their way and but the police were like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Remember that correctly. I told you that at first the police didn't pay too much attention to that. And why would they?
Right.
Because you find a body that is lying in the forest for 6 weeks already. Yes, obviously you will note down what people are reporting and they saw somebody and blah, blah, blah. But that's not your first thought, that must be the murderer, right?
Right. And it's a beautiful day. Other people are going to be in the woods.
People are in the forest.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But obviously after the second couple was found on 27th of July, they took another look at that eyewitness report. and they had like a composite drawing or identikit drawing or however you call it, made from that description. And he was described as follows. 40 to 50 years old, height between 175 and 180. So that's 5.7 to 5.9. I think that's around my height.
Same.
Brown hair. The
Same.
flyer calls it.
I'm like, it's not me.
Medium length, which is funny. I'm gonna post a drawing because, okay, that's 1989. Nowadays, we would call that short brown hair. Trust me.
I have all these pictures of my dad where his hair is like where I'm a baby, and it's only because I'm a baby and he probably had no time, where his hair is like kind of shaggy. Just a little bit.
Yeah, touching the ear and the collar, something like that, right?
Exactly. Over his ears, touching his collar, and he's like, God, look how long my hair is. I look like a hippie. I'm like, Dad, I can assure you, you do not.
It's the same with that one. Like when we wouldn't describe that as long hair.
No.
So, yeah, but for 1989, it probably was because it was very clearly also in the drawing touching his ears. What else? He was wearing a green shirt and dark pants, but not jeans, and probably dark shoes. He was also wearing a dark bag. There's also a drawing. It looks like kind of a tote bag. They also said that he had a very grumpy expression on his face. After the second couple was found and, people released the drawing and asking for eyewitness reports and somebody saw something and blah, 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 please contact the police. People started to stay away from the Göhrde. They started calling it Totenwald, so Forest of the Dead.
I get it. Yeah. See, I love your language because here you couldn't say Forest of the Dead because you would sound pretentious. But you have a word, like you can... I enjoy your language. Sorry.
I mean, there's clearly a murderer on the loose.
Yeah,
so,
it's very scary. This story I find this very, very creepy. I'm glad you waited for me for this one because, it's going to keep me up.
What else? A reward was offered, 50,000 D-Mark, and I'm sorry, I didn't convert it to how much would it be worth today. Would be around 25,000 euros, but then with inflation, maybe 40,000 euros. It's just a wild guess now. Really, don't take my word for it. A reward for information that would lead to the arrest of the murderer. Also, the case was talked about twice on the TV show Aktenzeichen XY ungelöst, once in 1989 and a second time the following year in 1990.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to repeat the name of the show. Although I do have an idea for a drinking game for us at some point. But I know that we talked about it before, right? Mm-hmm. I think Yogtsi, maybe Madeleine McCann, maybe more often. It's what America's Most Wanted was modeled on, right? That show. We stole America's Most Wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I always used to think that it was the other way around because usually we copy American things over here. But no, Aktenzeichen XY ungelöst was the first and it started already in 1967. So it's been there for a long time.
Yeah. That
name makes you laugh, right?
It does. It does because my brain is trying to hear words that make sense to me. So every time you've said it, I think you're saying axolotl does something. And I know
you know why? Because the Y, the letter Y, is called Y in German.
Oh, epsilon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So, but yeah, we steal all kinds of TV shows. I keep finding out more and more things that we stole from Europe. Like so many things. All right. So there's a drawing of that man.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to share it with us. I assume it's better than the egg drawing with hair.
Yes.
I think that's the low bar from which all other identikits are
Can't get
measured.
Worse than that.
Yeah. And the case is on television.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming, a super popular show, right? Like it was here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have stolen it. So there must have been tips coming in. Like people had to have been trying to get that money.
And there was a nice reward money out. Yeah. Yes, so overall the police questioned over 10,000 people. And yes, leads are coming in. And they are, for example, looking for guests who stayed at the hotels and the health clinics in the area. They are looking for people who disappeared from mental health institutions. they look at people who live in the area who have a known history of violent crimes or sexual assault or all these things. They do it all. They do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And they check some people, but the murders cannot be solved. And you mentioned it before that usually you would think that maybe one of the spouses of the second victims found out about the affair and murdered them. And obviously the police had the same thought. I mean, it's the first thing you think about, right? When you hear they were having an affair. They were out there having an affair.
Definitely, yeah.
They suspected Ingrid Warmbier's husband, and they thought that he might have found out about the affair and hired a contract killer. But that the killer shot the wrong couple at first.
That's happened before, Of course you know. The mistaken, when the wrong woman was killed on a hit. That case is on my list, but I always feel like everyone knows it. If you guys don't know it, let us know and we'll tell you about it. So, did that pan out as a theory? It didn't, right? Because
it's a possibility, and given the statistics, it was definitely absolutely necessary that they look at the spouses. But no, nobody had hired a contract killer.
Yeah.
Then they thought they had found another possible lead, so there was a similar murder in June of 1989 in Wales. The murder of Gwenda and Peter Anthony Dixon on 29th of June 1989. And the couple had been on a camping trip near Littlehaven. Their bodies were found on 5th of July 1989 in some undergrowth. And the London Evening Standard printed an article on 6th of July 1989 titled, and it's really heartbreaking and how they write it, it's titled Murder of the Loveliest Couple, and it's written by Patrick McGowan. I'm just gonna read a quick excerpt so you know what's going on there. Quote, "The loveliest couple in the world to those who knew them met death of the most brutal kind where they might least have expected it, on a beautiful cliff-top path they had walked together for 20 years. Peter and Gwenda Dixon had hoped eventually to make their home near the spectacular 300-feet cliffs on the southwestern tip of Wales. Instead, they met their death at the hands of a shotgun killer who blasted them repeatedly and left their bodies hidden in undergrowth. They were a devoted couple whose bodies were found just a few feet apart. Mr. Dixon, 51, a marketing manager, had his hands bound tightly behind his back. His wife, like him, had been shot several times, but her body was found partly clothed, the clear suggestion of a sex attack adding to the horror. That such a killing should occur in surroundings of such natural beauty has made the crime even more sickening to the detectives who have warned hikers to stay away from the Pembrokeshire coastal path until the murderer is found." End quote.
That's incredibly sad. It actually reminds me, this whole thing reminds me of an unsolved murder of a couple in New Hampshire, the Reeds, that have been on the news a lot. It's so sad. The coast of Wales is too beautiful a thing for such a horrible thing to happen. Too beautiful a place for such a horrible thing to happen. I hate it when, I hate all of it. All right. So was this a similar, I assume this must have been a similar MO?
Oh yeah, they too had been shot in the head, but also in the chest. Gwenda was naked from the waist down. Her clothes had been thrown from the cliff. They were tied, lying face down, things like this, right?
Yeah. So lots of similarities, but of course now we're in Wales, not Germany.
Right, but the thing is that witnesses reported seeing a German tourist whose description did fit the description of the man they were looking for in the Göhrde Murders. The witnesses in the Dixon murders described the suspect as male, white, 5'8" to 6 feet, 30 to 45 years, suntanned, unshaven. He was in possession of a gentleman's pedal cycle, which had straight handlebars. The pedal cycle was of the plain style. End quote. That was the description. On 27th of June 1992, so 3 years later, the London Guardian printed an article several pages long that explained why the murderer had been believed to possibly be a German tourist. Quote, "They found a woman in a village near St. Bride's Bay who had seen the suspect on the day before the murder, and he had been with another man, a young chap with fair hair. She had seen them several times walking along the road, and then she had seen the fair-haired man alone, as if the suspect had turned off and left him. The most likely turning would have taken the suspect down towards Peter and Gwenda Dixon. The fair-haired man was now a vital lead. He had talked to the killer, but was probably nothing to do with the crime, an ideal source. But who was he? The police went to BBC Crime Watch, appealed for sightings, took a record 380 calls before midnight, and nearly 1,200 more in the next few days, including one from a lorry driver who thought he had given this man a lift along the M4 to Neath in Wales. He was German, the driver reckoned. They pushed the story in the local press and found a motorist who remembered picking him up from the roundabout near Neath, where the lorry had left him. He was indeed German, the motorist said, and he was a teacher from somewhere near Stuttgart. The police contacted all the youth hostels in the area, drew up a short list of young male Germans from the Stuttgart area, contacted Interpol, the German Youth Hostel Association, and 50 different media outlets in Germany, and finally traced their man. But he had not met a scruffy stranger on an old-fashioned bike. He knew nothing. The police wondered whether, in the 10 days they had spent in Wales, the Dixons had met someone who had turned against them. They developed a film in Peter's camera and used it to reconstruct their holiday, even blowing up a picture of a Hereford cow so that they could read the number on its ear tag and establish its whereabouts. End quote.
That lead just fizzled out? It went nowhere?
Yeah. So that's where the whole, well, it could be connected to the Göhrde murders and the suspect could be German, so that's where that came from, right?
Yeah, that's I mean, the worst thing you should ever fear from a German tourist is just the towel thing at the pool in the morning at like 3 a.m, right?
True.
That's all I know about German tourists. Chair stealers, the lot of them.
So there were several other theories that the police looked into. The Göhrde murders happened around the time when British soldiers were on training somewhere not too far from the crime scenes in the Göhrde. So the thought was that maybe it's the other way around, right? That not a German man murdering people in Wales, but a British man murdering people in Germany.
Oh, that's absolutely possible.
Of course, it's possible. Almost anything is possible, as we know, right?
I mean, yeah.
But ultimately, there was no connection between the Göhrde murders and the murders of Peter and Gwenda Dixon, because in 2009, the real murderer of Mr. and Mrs. Dixon was found, and it was the British serial killer John William Cooper, who now serves a life sentence for 4 counts of murders, 1 rape, 1 sexual assault, and 30 burglaries, and 1 attempted robbery. But he's actually the suspect in several other murder cases and sexual assault cases. But he was never near the Göhrde.
Okay. So, was there anything else? Anything that the police knew or suspected? Did they have anything? Any evidence?
Well, they did find hair and some other DNA material in one of the cars. Hair that was believed to belong to the murderer. And we know 1989, the DNA testing, especially, I don't know, when did it start? Somewhere in the late 80s, but it was like in its infancy, right?
Yeah.
Especially in Germany. But they archived it, which is, thank God.
Yeah.
They also thought that the murderer must have known the forest pretty well, so that he was probably from around the area. They suspected that he might have had an accomplice, because, well, we know how he got away from the crime scene, but how did he get there? Like, how did he get into the Göhrde?
Yeah.
The investigator thought that maybe he had somebody who drove him there, or picked up his cars.
Yeah.
How did he get there?
How?
Yeah.
That
How?
also makes sense because of the 2 victims. I mean, I know with a gun you could always maybe subdue 2 people by threatening to harm one, but it's harder.
It's possible that the second person maybe didn't even know what's going on, that they just really drove them, or that they were really an accomplice. I mean, there's so many possibilities, and we just don't know.
We
right?
just don't know. Yeah. It's all just speculation.
Other than that, the case went cold, and it did stay cold for a very long time. And of course, from time to time, it would be revisited, and later the online sleuth came, and the armchair detectives, and they were discussing the Göhrde murders online, and all that, and how the case ultimately was solved, because I can tell you this now, it was solved.
Okay.
We will be talking about next week, because trust me, there's so much more we need to talk about when it comes to this case.
Oh, man. I want to know now. Oh, wow. I can't believe I've never heard of this case. I'm so impressed that one of our listeners immediately knew what it was.
Right.
Of course, so many of our listeners know so much more about these things than I do, for sure.
And she was like, oh yeah, that's my favorite case and I was waiting for you to cover it. And I'm like, thanks, that's no pressure at all.
Oh, that's the scariest. Did you send them your notes? To be like, did I miss anything? Oh, wow. Oh, this is great. They're going to be excited when they see this. Are they in the Facebook group? They'll be excited to talk about it, hopefully, in the Facebook group. So this is very disturbing, this case. It's a really disturbing case.
Before we get into something good, I mentioned before that unlocked cars were maybe not that uncommon in the 80s. So my dad, his first car, when he made his driver's license, I was already born. And he bought a sage green VW Golf back in the days. And he was someone who would not only never lock our apartment door, which is great, he would also regularly leave the car unlocked. And worse, he would even leave the keys in the ignition if he thought he would be back in just a minute.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And exact same with my mom, but it was a yellow VW Rabbit, which is what we call the Golf over here. That little two-door yellow Rabbit is what Mom had.
So one time he parked in front of our local pastry shop. It must have been summer because the windows were down. And he just wanted to get some cake for the family.
Ugh, I love a man who brings home cake for the family.
He jumps out of the car, key in the ignition, and he runs inside the shop. And after getting some, I'm sure it was delicious pastry, he gets in the car, he wants to turn the key. No more key. So he starts to look on the floor, he pats down his chest pocket, his pants pockets. What the hell, where are the fucking keys, right? All of a sudden a hand comes through the open window, the car key dangling from a finger. And I was asked, looking for these. And it was one of the town's police officers who had decided it was about time that my dad learned to not leave the key in the ignition anymore.
He's just trying to save himself some future paperwork. Like, listen, buddy, do me a favor. I love that story. I'm pretty sure that I've already told you all the story about the time my aunt stole a car. If I didn't tell you that story, let me know, and I'll tell it another time when it becomes relevant, and I'll remember I hadn't, but I had a car that was awful, and I used to leave it parked with the keys, like, in the ignition and everything unlocked and the windows down because I was legitimately praying someone would just fucking steal it. I was just hoping it would get stripped and stolen and, like, disappear.
Nobody did.
And nobody would steal that fucking car. And it was a BMW. It was the shittiest BMW. It had fabric seats.
What's wrong with fabric seats?
Nothing, but people would always get in and go, oh, it has fabric seats.
But many modern cars, we have fabric seats.
But here, like, BMW is such a luxury car that you would automatically assume it would be leather.
Okay, but BMW also have a lot of fabric seats. Not everybody gets leather seats.
Well, now we know. Now we all know that that's true. But at the time, people were always surprised. It was the first thing they'd say. They'd get into the car and go, oh, it has fabric seats. That car I had to drive that car with one on the brake and one on the gas because there was a problem with one of the belts where it would stall out so I had to drive with both feet. So my left foot was always, like, ready on the clutch and my right foot was toe on the gas and heel on the brake and ready to go. That was a complicated car. But yeah, and then I was parked somewhere. I was parked somewhere and someone goes, "Excuse me, miss," like wicked Boston accent. "Excuse me, miss." And I'm like, yeah? And I'm all immediately, like, in a sweat, like in a flop sweat because I'm afraid of confrontation and people. And she's like, "You got a hairy tailpipe." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "You look like you got some hair coming out of your tailpipe." And I'm still like, "I beg your pardon?" I thought he was just insulting me. So I walk around, and it looks like someone's shoved a Barbie doll up my muffler. It literally looks like long hair is coming out of the muffler of the car. And I thought someone had done some, like, voodoo. I didn't know what was going on. It was the liner of the muffler working its way out of the car. That car was such a death trap. And they were like, "Well, it's going to just catch on fire at some point." And I was like, great. Hopefully I'll get out in time and it'll all be over. No one would steal that car. And that memory right there is my something good of the shittiest car I ever owned. I called her Ethel, the German bitch. Yeah, that was a great car. I mean, I hated her, but I loved her in the way you love and hate cars when you're young and poor, right?
Yeah. So that was your something good.
Yeah, that can be.
Okay.
Put you out of your misery.
My something good is that the lightning bugs are back, and I love them, and it makes me happy. And that's my something good.
That is something good.
So easy and quick. That's my something good.
Today was a real trip down memory lane kind of a day for me in terms of cars. Thanks for coming on that journey with me. All right. Johanna has made her goal of top 5 on the podcast Hot 50, but we are still just a little bit shy of my goal, 1,000 reviews in the United States. And don't think we don't appreciate every single, I want 1,000 in every country eventually. And I want to come to all of your countries and meet you and eat your food and talk about your murders. But in the meantime, if you could leave us a review, we would be so grateful. We really do read them all and we appreciate them. And it truly does help other people find us who like the same sort of thing you like.
Also, if I might add, if you really like a podcast, like really, really like a podcast, please, not just us, go to your favorite podcast app that you use and leave them a review. They all work so incredibly hard. Everybody gets a mean review now and then. I mean, that's just part of the business, but that's why the good reviews are so much appreciated and needed. So give them a 5-star rating.
It's so true, especially independent podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah, independent podcasts are, it's a tough
it's
world
hard.
out there.
It is. Yeah, it's true. It's so much harder. Well, now I understand how. I remember when we first started doing this and you were saying how, like, what our numbers were for the first year or whatever. And I didn't understand how well we were actually doing, you know, how many podcasts don't make it. And I understand why. It's so much more work than you think, especially for Johanna, who does an amazing job. So please leave her good reviews. All right. So please leave us a review. If you want to get in touch with us, if there's something you want to tell us about or ask us about or any sort of query you have, you can reach us at freshhellpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want more information, you can go to our website, which is freshhellpodcast.com. And there you're going to find, again, how to email us, what our P.O. box is, what else? Where you can listen to all of our content, information on our Patreon content. We have some things planned that are going to be fun. I finally got this box in the mail to Johanna, so you'll have to do an unboxing when you get it so I can explain everything that's in there. And then I think that box is going to lead to a lot more videos because there's a lot of stuff in that box. We're going to have to do some like taste testing stuff. It's going to be good.
Okay.
It's exciting. And what else should I send her? If you're in our Patreon, always let me know what you want me to send to Johanna, and I'll do my best to put it in a box. So yeah, you can find our Patreon. We've got a game night coming up. Is it June 29th?
Yes.
So June 29th.
For our murder tier.
For our murder tier. We will once again be playing Cards Against Humanity. If you're in the murder tier and you are not sure if you want to play or you're nervous or you're anxious or you're shy, just come join us. You can be a lurker. It's totally cool.
Yeah, you can just listen and see how everything works. Also, I think next week we're gonna get the next pins out.
Yes.
If you already contacted us in the last 2 weeks, if you send us a message that you didn't get it, your name is on the list. We're gonna send it out again.
That's right.
And if you haven't contacted us that your pin is still missing, please do it so that we can send it out next week with the others. Please.
Yes. We will eventually get you those pins, so help me. We're going to get them to you.
I see you're going to travel around the States and deliver it.
I'm training a fleet of carrier ravens. So
that would be cool.
Wouldn't that be the best? Just one day, an angry mob of corvids arrives on your doorstep, and you know that Annie was thinking of you. Yeah. So I think, is that everything?
Yeah.
I think.
Tell your pets we said hi. Tell them we miss them, we love them, hug them, cuddle them, kiss them on the noses and give them treats and take them to the vet. And if you are in an area where it's really hot outside now, let them stay inside. Give them lots of water. Let them lie on the bathroom floor. It's cool there. They're gonna enjoy that. If the ravens come with the pin. Give them some water too and some seeds or whatever they want.
Definitely give them whatever they want.
Don't let them take your soul. Be kind to your fellow human being. Be kind to yourself. I know that's hard.
Oh, that's the worst, but you gotta do it. Well, I think that's everything for now. If you're having a hard time, and I know there are a couple people in the Facebook group who have been through some really hard shit right now, and we are thinking of you, and it will get better. And if you are going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.